Hello and welcome to Changemakers. In this show, we have interesting conversations with people who are making a change, making a difference, making an impact. Our guest today is Sanjay Saxena, founder CEO of Destination Himalayas, an organization committed to environmentally and socially responsible travel in the countries influenced by the Himalayan region. Sanjay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gopi. Pleasure to be here. And in case you didn't know, the CEO actually stands for Chief Exploratory Officer.
Chief Exploratory Officer, that is funny. I do remember 12 years ago, you taking me out on an exploration along with a group of people, and you took me up and down safely the third highest mountain in the world, Kanchenjunga. And I was watching at the time and realized that mountains, hiking, and that whole Himalayan region is part of your entire DNA, is part of your bloodstream. How did that come about? Did you live there? Did you grow up there?
Well, yeah, I was born in India and I lived there until I immigrated here when I was 27. But I think it was about 14, 15 years old when my father actually first sent me to a mountaineering school called the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering. And I completed a couple of climbing courses from there. And just kind of loved it, being in the mountains, and never stopped going back. And so I've been doing it ever since.
But that's just one small part of that region, because when you said countries influenced by the Himalayas, there is India and Bhutan and Tibet and Nepal all the way down to Sri Lanka and Burma, etc. And looks like you expanded your horizons to travel in other places. And I've seen pictures of you taking groups of people to, say, the Pushkar Fair, or even the iconic Taj Mahal. And just tell us about travel in the entire region that you've organized.
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, once I started guiding, I started off as a climbing guide. And then from a climbing guide, it moved on to being a trek leader. And from a trek leader to a little more of a cultural guide, because, let's face it, the bulk of the tourism market is actually more into, cultural travel. People are coming to India or to South Asia to visit its antiquity, its history, its cultural heritage, and not everything is high up in the mountains. And so the cultural tours is a big part of our business. And to really survive in the pretty competitive tourism market, you have to be able to do other trips. And for instance, the Pushkar Camel Fair, it's one of the most popular destinations. I would say in the last 20 years, pretty much every year, we have had a group travel to the Pushkar Camel Fair, just because it is such a fantastic site with, I want to say, anywhere up to about 250,000 head of camel, cows, bullocks, sheep, horses, everybody gathered in just this one big sand dune, and they just camped out there for about 10 days. It's a phenomenal gathering and quite a sight. Pretty amazing photographic opportunity too.
Absolutely.
And along with the Pushkar Camel Fair, then something as iconic as the Taj Mahal. Everybody does go to visit it, and so that is, I would say, 99% of our trips that go to India, they go to visit the Taj Mahal for sure, amongst other things.
So one of the things I find, as great as modernization is, I find that it also is making big parts of the world very homogeneous. So as at least big cities, you travel from Frankfurt to New York to Beijing, it all is beginning to look increasingly like
Bombay.
each other. Mumbai too. So do you think, whereas when you go to the Pushkar Fair, or it's somewhere in Masai Mara, you realize you are truly in another part of the world, very different from anything you would know. But do you think with this kind of modernization rapidly spreading, especially all over India and that region, that we won't have anything as exotic as the Pushkar Fair?
I really don't think so, because even today, if you go to the Pushkar Fair, I was there in November this year, and I found a big difference, say, in the last 10 years. Some of the camel herders actually had cell phones, but they were still wearing their fuchsia and lime green and orange turbans. They were still dressed in their salwar kameez with their, leather chappals, and they were still, riding the camels, but they were also using the cell phone. I think the way India is moving, or great parts of South Asia, they haven't given up on their cultural heritage. They still very much embrace it, but yet they are taking in some of modernity, or at least all the good points of it. So I think it's a great mix between the two. I mean, why shouldn't the camel herder be able to talk to his family back in his village and outside Jodhpur on the cell phone while he's in Pushkar for 10 days?
Absolutely. Okay, so if you're a National Geographic photographer, your photo ops are still pretty safe, is what I gather from this.
Yes, it is. I mean, as far as photography is concerned, for places like this, you do still have to, avoid certain things. I mean, in the sense, you can just ask the Rajput guy, hey, do you mind putting your cell phone in your pocket? And or you could even take the two, a combination of modernity and tradition. So photographic opportunities abound. And locations like India or anywhere in the Himalaya, for that matter of fact, whether it's Bhutan or Nepal, the landscape is just so gorgeous. The people are so colorful that everybody comes back with fantastic pictures. I mean, you don't have to be a pro photographer to get good pictures out of that region.
Absolutely.
It's just a photogenic place.
Yeah, I would agree. I've come back with some fantastic pictures, and it's definitely not the skill of the person behind the lens, I must say. So Sanjay, when I travel, the most interesting part of the whole travel experience is the unexpected, the surprises of the different kinds of people you meet and the shared experiences in that human interaction. And for you, travel around the world, especially in that region, it's your career, it's your job. So I'm sure you have a list of 10,000 really interesting people that you've met. But if you were to pick 2 or 3, who stands out in your mind?
Well, I will tell you the few people that do stand up in my mind, but I just want to go back on one thing that you just said, which is about how interesting people are. And you really hit the nail on the head there, because I've been in this tourism business now for 3 decades, and I've got a lot of people that have traveled with me. They've come back. We've had fantastic sunrises on the Taj Mahal or on mountains, fantastic events, and people take great pictures. They come back, but a year later, 2 years later, they remember the people that they met, and not so much the sunrise on Kanchenjunga. So the people of Asia really do make a fantastic difference in the experience, just because they're so welcoming. And one of the most profound impacts that has been on me has actually been His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whom I've been lucky enough to have met about 8 times now. And which was amazing. The first time, actually, I was about 14 years old. My parents had gone there to visit to the Dharamsala, and I actually didn't really want to go into the monastery or sit in a room to meet His Holiness. I was more interested at that time. Most of McLeod was just a pine forest, and I told my dad, "Hey, I'm going for a hike." And I was up in the trees, lying on the pine needles, listening to the whistling sound that the wind made coming through the pine cones, whereas His Holiness and my family, the rest of my family, was literally 200 yards away having a discussion. And fast forward a few decades, and then I'm just dying to meet him. And every opportunity that I get to guide a trip to Dharamsala or to attend the teaching, I'm there. So it's been a real change. But he's very, very inspiring. And
if only you knew back then,
if only
10 years later, you'd have to
yes.
wait in a long line to get an audience with him.
Exactly. Then that is true. And so he's one such person.
Beautiful.
And another person that I would say was really intriguing was actually just a young boy in Kerala, who actually inspired us to do a lot more for the community. And it was a young kid who was not wanting to go to school. And he didn't want to go to school because he was embarrassed because he didn't have a school uniform. You know how in India, every school has a uniform. And even though the school was free and they were supposed to send him, just because he was so poor, the family couldn't afford a uniform, he wouldn't go. And I said, well, I mean, if I buy you a uniform, will you go? And he said, yes. But I mean, that kind of struck me. We've been traveling through all this region, whether it's the Himalaya mountains, Nepal, or India, taking pictures, enjoying. Basically, I earn a living out of taking people there. And then there are people that live in that region who are barely able to sustain themselves.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me thinking and shifted direction of our travel company to a certain extent. But these were, like I said, two people that I think are important. These two are.
Absolutely. Well, that story of the little boy, I don't even know if you still remember his name or not, clearly has a significant influence. But that brings up an interesting thing I've noticed during travel. I stumble across an as yet undiscovered, exciting, exotic place, and then a few years later, when I go back, everyone else has discovered it also, and the place gets built up, and all of a sudden there is a big run on the place, and it gets to a point where travelers say, I don't want to go there anymore. They abandon it and move on. So there's this boom and bust cycle that I've often seen of places like islands in Thailand or places around Nepal. How, as somebody who thinks deeply about responsible travel, how are you responding to that situation?
Yeah. Well, the boom and bust cycle has been a very traditional tourism problem.
Yeah.
And that is the way the industry was. And I think about maybe 2 or 3 decades ago, kind of a slogan for the entire tourism community came about, which was take only pictures, leave nothing but footprints.
Beautiful.
Which was a great one.
Yeah,
And it lasted while the industry kind of matured. But in today's world, which is so much more global with the internet, with the easier travels, I think there is a moral obligation for travelers to do more than just that. And that is what I try to challenge all our clients to do. And that is, can they actually help in, say, poverty elevation, help with education of the really, poorer class in the regions that they are traveling through.
Yeah. And so the concept of volunteerism, I guess.
That is where the whole volunteer tourism came about, and now this wonderful word volunteerism that has been, I guess, coined. And there are a great number of companies out there that are doing fantastic work like that. There are quite a few travelers that actually go on tours, on trips where they volunteer their entire time helping, with the local community. And we are also doing a great part of that. We have a number of schools and medical clinics that we provide assistance to through our client base. The biggest program, of course, is what was started in Kerala by the inspiration of this one kid, plus the principal of that school, which is also a great story. This was about 2005. We were talking to this elementary school principal in the middle of Kerala. You actually had to take a canoe boat for about 20 minutes before you reached the school. There were no roads that came into that place. It was in the backwaters. And the principal said that we have, over 150 poor families living nearby, but almost half the kids do not come to the school because the parents are using them for work, or the kids want to just stay at home and help with the family. And the question became, how do you inspire these families to send their kids to school? And she said, if I can get these kids into the classroom at kindergarten, I know I can keep them all the way through till 8th grade, which is what her school was. And the plan that she came up with was, if we give them some food, an incentive to come in. One was, of course, the school uniform. But then the other one was giving them a good, healthy lunch. Because at that time, the government did provide, but it wasn't enough. It was basically gruel. It was, rice with really watery dal, and that is all that the kids got to eat. And so with the help of the Grace Family Vineyard Foundation, because they funded a lot of this project, we set up a fantastic, nutritious lunch program 5 days a week for the entire school. There was a cook that was hired who cooked, and the parent-teacher body hired the cook, and then they would purchase all the food ingredients from the local women's co-op. The women's co-op was getting everything from the local farmers and the local fishermen. So all the money was being recycled within the community. So the entire community got, behind this project. And providing this great lunch was just the motivation that a lot of the families needed. They did not need to, pay for it. And they knew that the kids were getting at least one good, healthy meal a day. And the first year, enrollment went up 30%.
Wow.
Which was great. And since this program was initiated, which was January of 2006 to now, I think there have been about 128,000 lunches that have been served at this school.
Incredible.
And all this has been funded by our client base that goes and travels in that region.
So what is the role of the travelers who go in there in this, if it's funded by this foundation?
In this particular instance, they primarily finance it. And we spend a day at the school where the travelers actually sit and have lunch. Sometimes they even help prepare the lunch and serve the lunch. But because it's only a meal service, we just do it for the day, and then they continue on to one of our other schools.
I see.
We have 3 other schools in that region, all of which have slightly different needs, including a school which is called the Dipti Special School. And that is, again, a very fascinating school because it is for mentally handicapped kids. And as you know, in India, people with mental illness or mentally challenged, they're kind of like second-class citizens.
It's a stigma.
There is a stigma. And so a lot of these families have kind of, pushed their child away. And what the school has been doing is they keep the kids 5 days a week, but then on the weekend, they ask the families to take the kids. And they have been helping the families understand that these children can actually lead a nice, healthy life, and they should not be just, pushed aside. And so the training that they are doing with the parents and showing the community that these kids, are real people and they can live a productive life is a very, very, different approach to how, children like these are treated in India. And so this particular school is where we actually go and help in terms of spending days. We go and spend 3 days or 4 days volunteering, helping with the kids, taking care of the kids, take them on a field trip. We hire a bus, take them out to the local museum. This is actually only about 2 hours or 1.5 hours or so out of Cochin. So just taking them out.
Groups that you take do this and they're part of this field trip, etc.?
That is exactly correct.
So the interesting thing I'm finding, Sanjay, is even if it's like a 1 day of overlap, the fascinating thing is you are making people from 2 different worlds that would otherwise just not have come together, overlap and collide. And that is one of the most interesting aspects of this whole project that you're doing.
That is true, and that actually is one of the reasons why I'm in this business too. The fact that I have 1 foot in Asia and 1 foot in the U.S.
Absolutely.
Kind of like a bridge between the two, and I find that very, very fascinating and actually very educational for me too. And I haven't really stopped learning ever since I started, taking people from here over to my home country.
I see. And if any of our viewers want to actually get involved in voluntourism, what do you suggest they do?
Well, they can certainly give me a call or send me an email. Can I give my toll-free number?
Destination Himalayas, I'm sure they'll
That's
find it.
right, yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, even if people search on the web, there are lots of great companies that are doing similar kind of stuff. I mean, we are specializing in Asia, so we have programs in India and in Tibet. These are the 2 locations where we have programs, but people have similar stuff happening in South America, in Africa, or in other parts of Asia, and actually even in the Americas.
Yep. So one interesting thing, and it's connected with what's going on in the news right now that I keep thinking about, is that what's going on in the Arab world right now is things that the temperature, the political climate, things can change very rapidly. And you're taking groups of people from one part of the world into these unknown countries, territories for them. And you ever worried that that things could suddenly change and you might be in the midst of a hotbed of activity of some kind?
Yeah, I mean, that is always a concern.
Yeah.
And
Have you
especially,
been in a situation like that, that
yeah,
you had to?
we have had, it has happened a number of times in the past. For instance, we have treks, say, going to Nepal.
Yeah.
And a decade ago, there was a lot of turmoil there. The Maoist activity came up. Suddenly, there would be a band or a strike.
That is right.
And
I
then what do
think
you do?
the time when you were going to take me to Everest Base Camp, that
Exactly.
happened.
And so we always have some kind of a alternate plan
Yeah.
set in place. I mean, you have to have that kind of situations, plan B and plan C's in place. Not always do they work, because if somebody's got their heart set on going to, say, see Everest, and Nepal gets shut down,
Yeah.
you cannot say, all right, I'm going to take you to go see Kanchenjunga in Sikkim. Some people would say yes, and others may not. So you have to be, a certain amount of flexibility is there. I mean, like for instance, right now in Egypt, if there were people going on a tour to see Egypt, you can't suddenly say, well, now I'll take you to go see the Great Wall instead.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great option, but that's not what they
Sure,
were looking for. But at all times, we do have risk management policies in place. Our staff periodically attends risk management courses, and then when we are planning, we always have a backup set up. And like for instance, right now, when we have travelers come to India, one of the first things we do at the orientation meeting is that every group of people is given a local cell phone. We provide a cell phone to them, which is a local cell phone, and it contains all of our emergency numbers.
Got it.
So that if they happen to be someplace and they're uncomfortable, or whether it's a flight cancellation or a sudden, politician that created some ruckus, they
They know
have
where to
a
find
way
you.
to call us, and
Yeah.
then we can get them out.
Well, I guess in that case, your title now changes from Chief Exploratory Officer to Chief Evacuation Officer.
Well, yes. Luckily, we haven't had to do that too many times.
Sure.
But we do plan and have contingency plans in place for any such eventuality.
Got it. So everything changes, the world is changing, and I'm sure along with the travel is changing also. And what sort of shifts are you seeing in the way people are traveling, or you are bringing about, shifts in attitudes to how people travel? So if you were to look 3 years ahead or 4 years ahead, 2015, how do you think travel will be in the regions that you organize trips to?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've been seeing is that, the baby boomers were really the influencing segment of the market. I mean, what they were doing was what the trend really happened, and we have to kind of follow them to a great extent. And as they are aging, so travel too has kind of slowed down. I remember when I first started in the late 70s and 80s, I used to spend about 250 days a year with my backpack hiking, because one trekking group would finish, the second one would start. Today, we'll do 3 or 4 trips in a year at the most, and the others are all more less physically active, let's say. They're still physically active, but nowhere to that extent. And I see that trend kind of moving on. And what we are investing in right now is a river cruise boat in India. River cruising has become quite popular, and India has one of the biggest Asian rivers, which is the Brahmaputra River, and there is no way to explore that entire region of northeast India, what used to be called NIFA, the Northeast Frontier Agency, because there is not much infrastructure. There are no good hotels. There's about 2 small airports, and 2 roads that go east and west, and that's about it. So this concept of putting in a river cruise boat, which can go up and down the river, and then take day excursions to visit all the indigenous tribal populations that are in Assam and in Arunachal Pradesh, in Nagaland, the entire Northeast, is going to be a pretty good trip. And then there's also the game parks there with Kaziranga and Manas. So as far as India is concerned, I see the trips going on the river cruise boat quite a bit. The other trend that I think is going to be happening as we get to 2015 or so is that the vacations are becoming shorter. No longer are people going to go and take 24, 30-day trans-Himalaya treks. It's 10 days from airport to airport. Yeah, 12 days.
Yeah.
So the shorter trend is happening.
I see. It's a quick in and out. The Mac tourism
Maximize your time. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned backpacking 250 days. I've always been dying to know this. When I go on a trip, I need several suitcases full of stuff. Whereas veteran travelers like you get around years at a time on nothing more than a backpack. What do you carry in your backpack? Can I take a look?
Yeah, certainly. So
Put it in the lap.
this is some of the stuff that I carry with me when traveling on an actual trek, because their trekking is where it becomes very important. You have your emergency flashlight, which is absolutely important. Your MacGyver Swiss Army knife,
Absolutely.
very handy. This is something that you never ever leave home with, and this is basically iodine tablets.
Yeah.
And they are there to purify as much water as you possibly need. A nice little packet of waterproof matches that will light up anywhere at any time. Although there are some new gadgets that are coming out. This is, I don't know if you've seen this or not, it's a new water purifier.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, it's called a SteriPan, and it's just battery operated. Put it into your water, stir it, and it's good to go. So you got to keep up with the modern times.
Absolutely, and we barely even got to the top of the bag, and then I only wonder what goes to the right of the backpack itself. Anyway, so I know, just in kind of closing, since we are coming at the end of time, I wanted to ask you any final words of wisdom very quickly that you'd leave behind for our viewers in terms of travel, because these days more and more people are traveling and getting out, and the world is a fairly big place.
Well, I really think that giving back to the local community in any little way that you can is a great way to go.
Well, thank you, Sanjay. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Our guest today has been Sanjay Saxena, CEO of Destination Himalayas, an organization investing in responsible and environmentally responsible travel in the country surrounding the Himalaya region.